In my previous video about the real-life sightings of the mysterious men in black, I told a couple stories about how these strange entities would visit the witnesses of UFO sightings. However, there was one sighting in particular that was so unsettling that I decided that it deserved its own video. So without further ado, here's the story of Indrid Cold. The story takes place at 7:25 p.m. on November 2nd, 1966. Woodrow Derenberger, who was a sewing machine salesman, was driving home from Marietta in Ohio on Interstate 77 near Parkersburg, West Virginia. In his own words, he said that when he was driving, there was a car that was following close behind him and then proceeded to overtake. Following closely behind this car, however, was, as he put it, an unidentified flying object, which then swerved in front of his truck and proceeded to slow down and stop. Woodrow described this craft as being akin to an old-fashioned kerosene lamp chimney, flaring at both ends, narrowing down to a small neck, and then enlarging in a great bulge in the centre. Derenberger said that out of this craft stepped out a strange individual, what looked to be a human man, walking slowly towards his truck on the right side. Even in the dim light, Derenberger was still able to have a look at his face and described him as such, stating, "His face looked like he had a good tan, a deep suntan. He was not too dark, but it was like he had just been out in the sun a lot and had a good tan. His hair was combed straight back and it was a dark brown, and he seemed to have a good thick head of hair. His eyebrows, his face, his features were very normal. I don't believe that he looked any different from any other man that we would meet on the street. However, as this man got closer, it seemed that he was far from normal." Derenberger then went on to state, "He had a large grin and kept his arms folded with his hands up under his armpits. And though he spoke to Derenberger, his smile never moved. He spoke," Derenberger said, "telepathically." Derenberger's blood ran cold. He said that this man was not speaking to him with his mouth, but seemingly through his mind. Derenberger was able to understand this man's voice, even though he was not speaking. He could hear it himself in his head. This creature asked Derenberger to roll down his window on the right side so he could speak to him. This creature stated, "Why are you frightened? Don't be frightened. We wish you no harm. We wish you only happiness." This man then told him his name. He said that he was known as Cold. Cold stated that he just wanted to know more about the human race, how they lived, how they operated. And at the end of this conversation, Cold stated that he would visit Derenberger again. Derenberger then stated that Cold told him where he was from, a planet known as Lanulos, in the galaxy of Ganymedes. After this encounter, Derenberger naturally went to the police, as any person would as well, reaching the Parkersburg police, and eventually, media caught wind of this investigation, and the WTAP news station was alerted and scheduled an interview with Derenberger the next day. Now obviously I'm not going to show the entire interview here, because it is half an hour long, but here's just a wee snippet just to see what this man was thinking and what he said during this interview.
And he asked me what the city of Parkersburg, he pointed to the lights, he didn't point, but he gave the impression that he was pointing, and he asked me what that was called. And I told him it was Parkersburg, it was a city, a town, and he asked me if most all the people lived in this city or town. And I explained to him that it was a place of business, it's where we transacted our business, that the people lived in communities, outlying communities, most of the people. And when I told him that this was a city, he said if where his home was, that was called a gathering. And again, he told me not to be frightened, which I was. I was very frightened. And as far as I can understand, This was all mental. There was no spoken words from him. I knew what he was asking me, but yet he stood there and his mouth did not move. He had a smile on his face. He appeared very courteous and friendly. And after I talked with him a while, he told me he would see me. He said, "We will see you again," and he left in his vehicle.
Should you wish to watch the full interview, it is linked down in the description if you just want to go down there and have a look. It is interesting to hear this account straight from the horse's mouth. After all, it happened literally the day before, and all the events are fresh in this person's mind. It is interesting to see that Cold did state that he would visit Derenberger again. It's also interesting to note that after this interview aired, a lot more witnesses came forward claiming that they saw this entity that Mr. Derenberger described. As promised by Cold, Derenberger stated that he was visited multiple times over the next month by this man, with Derenberger's family also saying that they saw this man as well. As you can imagine, going on national television and claiming about aliens and otherworldly entities in 1960s America, it did bring a lot of ridicule and embarrassment upon the Derenberger family, which unfortunately led to a lot of issues within the family and eventually leading to a divorce. Woodrow Derenberger died in 1990 at the age of 74. After all those years, he never even mentioned the event and never went back on his story. Now it is important to note that there have been other sightings of this man known as Indrid Cold, including earlier in that year, 1966, on October the 16th, when two boys in New Jersey were walking down 4th Street when they said they saw a man in the shadows, sitting next to a fence. They said that this man was wearing a metallic green suit, he was balding, and he had These two boys said that this man was wearing a metallic green suit, he was balding, and he had a huge grin on his face. They said that after this man stepped out of the shadows, the two boys ran, and this man ran directly behind them, chasing them down the street, eventually losing sight. Other than the fact that there was UFO sightings in the area at the time, and the man did match the description of Indrid Cold, I don't believe these sightings are connected. It is creepy for sure, but it does strike me more that these boys just simply saw a creepy man in an alleyway than a otherworldly entity from planet Lanulos. The same story goes for the third sighting, happening in Point Pleasant in West Virginia. In the Lilly family, the daughter was sleeping one night when she was awoken and saw a huge man with broad shoulders staring down at her, and this man also had a grin on his face. However, again, it does strike me as creepy, but it does seem more of a sleep paralysis issue than a cosmic visitor. Whichever way you spin it, the story of Woodrow Derenberger and Indrid Cold is definitely one for the books, and is very important in UFO history. From his testimony on Live TV to even though his relationship with his wife and his life essentially falling apart after his story, even up into his death, he never went back on his word. He never recanted a story about his horrifying sighting of Indrid Cold.